And welcome back. It's 1:37. You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Now, as the Russia-Ukraine conflict continues, putting two of Europe's biggest crop exporters out of action, there are growing concerns about possible food shortages here in Britain. So why are we covering hectares of British farmland in solar panels then? With less energy dependence on Russia, alternative sources are a must. And as we've often discussed on The Money, the government could soon be making announcements about the expansion of nuclear energy, plus more oil and gas extraction from the North Sea, and perhaps even the use of shale gas mined by fracking. Well, joining me to talk about our energy options and particularly the use of solar power is public policy commentator Jason Reed. Jason, welcome on to the show.
Thank you.
You've really got a beef with the amount of farmland that we're covering with solar panels, haven't you?
I have. Food insecurity in this country is something we don't talk about enough. Millions and millions of people live in households which struggle to put food on the table, and that's only going to get worse this year as the cost of living crisis really takes hold. And so against that backdrop, I think it's bonkers that we're giving up so much of our farmland voluntarily to renewable energy companies to cover in solar panels when the technology just isn't there yet for us to switch as a nation to renewable sources of energy.
Do we know the extent to which farmland's covered now by solar panels? I live in the east of England, heartland farming country of the UK. I do see quite a lot of solar panels just from when I'm driving along country roads and along the motorway.
We've seen a huge uptick in the last couple of years in the number of applications to local authorities for these kinds of projects. We've seen it went up by a third in 2021, and that trend is continuing into this year as well. It's knocking on the door of 1,000 separate solar farm projects that are in the works. And some areas, particularly areas with high proportions of farmland, are the hardest hit. Hampshire, for example, has been the subject of 28 different applications, most of which seem likely to go through. There's one that's going to cover 140 football pitches worth of land in Bramley and Silchester, which would make it the largest solar farm in England on agricultural land. All this farmland in other counties as well, of course, that we're just giving up in order to make Britain into effectively one giant solar panel.
Now, solar panels, photovoltaic cells, they are getting more sophisticated. Solar, we joke about the British weather, don't we? But solar power in the UK is not a joke, is it? Obviously, we're really good at wind power, who knew? But solar power is not a joke. You must acknowledge that. There is a role, don't you think, for some solar power and renewables more generally here in Britain?
Absolutely. There's a really important role for renewable energy of various kinds to play in where we get our energy from. But I think this rush to net zero as quickly as possible is really misguided. It would be really convenient in environmental terms if we could turn off the tap for all the fossil fuels tomorrow, but we can't do that for a number of reasons, not least because the technology just isn't there to accumulate and store energy through, for example, solar power that we would need to do in a cost-effective way to keep energy bills down. The government has all its targets for net zero and switching to renewable energy, which many have said are over-optimistic anyway. But even assuming we hit those targets, that's still many years in the immediate future where we will still need to rely on fossil fuels. And so I think it's a wild goose chase to pretend that we can just switch, turn all our farmland into solar panels and make all our energy needs go away. And then, of course, there's the immense collateral damage that has on the farming sector and our food security as well.
So you've been writing and researching in this area for some time, Jason. One reason we invited you on the show, I should tell you, is because we have talked to lots of farmers here on The Money. In fact, we've got a farming special tomorrow lunchtime about food security, about the fact that lots of farmers now, even if we could switch to domestic food production, which many people think we should, given our huge reliance that we now realise on Russia, Ukraine and food imports generally, because gas prices are high, because fuel prices are high, because fertiliser prices are so high, even if we were focused on domestic food production, it would still be really expensive by the time it gets in the shops.
This is a good point, and we definitely do need to be expanding the number of countries around the world that we're trading with when it comes to food and fertiliser and so on as well. But this latest crisis just goes to show that we do need the British farming sector as a crutch to lean on in times of crisis. You mentioned rightly, of course, Ukraine and Russia being two of the biggest crop exporters in the world. And the crops that we're buying from them are things like wheat and barley and corn. Exactly.
Absolute feedstock.
Exactly. And they're things that we don't need tropical climates to grow. We can and do grow those in this country as well. And so I think it makes a lot of sense to be maximising our ability to grow it in this country as well, so that when there are crises elsewhere in the world, we don't have people unable to put food on the table.
Well, it's an interesting debate, Jason, and we're grateful to you for your contribution here on today's show. Jason Reed there, policy commentator, talking about our energy options.